if that's okay.
Yep.
Sure.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Lori Charlton. It's October 1st, 2024. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Finance. I'll call the meeting to order and ask that we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To the members of the public who've dialed in or joined us via Zoom tonight, please know you are muted and will not be heard by board members, and there will be no live public comment until called for during the meeting. We welcome public comment on each of the voting items on tonight's agenda, and I'll open up for public comment as the board begins deliberations on those items. If you're on Zoom, you can indicate now or at any time prior to public comment via the chat function that you'd like to be heard. Please plan to limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Members of the public are always encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board at bof@fairfieldct.org. And if you do so, please remember to include your name and address as you would with live comment. So with that, we'll move to item 3. Resolved that the first selectman of the town of Fairfield is empowered to execute, authorize, and approve on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all contracts or amendments thereof with the Connecticut Region 1 Essential Support Function 8 Public Health Preparedness Grant Fiduciary Organization with regard to the CDC 2024 through 2029 Public Health Emergency Preparedness Cooperative Agreement with a grant funding period of July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2029. Funding shall be for $34,043 per year for each of the 5 years, or as amended by the CDC, State of Connecticut, or the Region 1 ESF 8 Public Health Preparedness Grant Fiduciary Organization, and shall cover the cost to support Fairfield's continued public health emergency preparedness and response efforts. All costs are 100% reimbursable from the CDC 2024 to 2029 PHEP cooperative agreement via the state of Connecticut and the Connecticut Region 1 ESF8 fiduciary organization. Okay, so can I have a motion to hear that item? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Mr. Curley. Thank you. The backup for this item is posted online. It runs from the beginning of the backup packet for 9 pages. And I believe, there he is. Welcome, Mr. Sands Cleary, who is the health director for the town of Fairfield, here to present the item. Good to see you. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So this is the preparedness grant. We've received this grant for the past 22 years. This funds our public health preparedness activities. We hire 2 part-time individuals, very part-time individuals, to work on this grant deliverables. And so this is all the work we do to be prepared for any kind of mass dispensing emergency, shelter emergencies, and other kinds of public health threats. And so this is a renewal of a 5-year contract. So it's $34,000 approximately for the next 5 years for a total of $170,000.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cleary. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, questions from the board on this item? Okay. Well, that's easy. All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the acceptance of the grant set forth in item 3 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Mr. Penley, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Mottola, Mr. Testani, Mr. Curley, Ms. LeClaire. Ms. Ruggiero, can you turn your camera on? Are you voting on this item?
Or verbal.
Or verbal? I don't. 1, 2,
Kevin just joined as well.
5. Ms. Ruggiero is 6, and Mr. Stark, are you voting in favor?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, I think the motion passes 7-0. We have 2 board members missing at the moment. Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sands. Appreciate it. All right, so we'll move on to item 4, to hear, consider, and act on changes to the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Plan as recommended by the Board of Finance Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Penley, second. Mr. Testani, thank you very much. Backup for this item is posted online and begins on page 10 of the posted backup. What's in the original backup on page 10 is the proposal that is going to be before us for consideration. There was also a supplemental package that went out today. It's mostly backup information, on the current plan, the current senior and disabled tax plan. It's there for the benefit of the public, and if any board members needed a refresher on how the plan works, but we're not planning on going through that in any detail. Before we dive into this, I want to thank the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee of this board and the RTM for their work on the proposal and for bringing this forward. I'm going to turn this over to our colleague, Mr. Curley, who chaired the Board of Finance Subcommittee for this item. And again, thank you, Mr. Curley.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just start by saying my expectation tonight is to provide a brief overview. We have with us tonight Ross Murray, who's our town tax assessor. We also have Sharon Pastilli and Dave Rock from the RTM Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee. They actually are the ones who get the credit for the heavy lifting. They were the ones who prepared the presentation that we'll walk through tonight. I'm actually going to ask Sharon to walk through those pages. But before we get started on that, I just wanted to kind of preface by saying the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief program hasn't had any substantive changes in a number of years. When I joined this board 3 years ago, we had talked about letting the existing program season a bit and see how the program is working. We did modify some language in the provisions earlier this year, but that was really more cleanup items. There are 3 items that are being proposed tonight. 2 of the 3, I think, are not controversial and similarly administrative in nature. There is one item that I think that this board should discuss in a bit more detail, and we can get into that. That's related to the qualifying asset value of applicants. But with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon and ask her to take the board through with this presentation. It's the same presentation that she presented to our committee about a month ago when we met, and appreciate all the efforts and thank her for joining.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Curley. I'm Sharon Pastilli. I am on the RTM in District 3 and chair of the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Subcommittee of the RTM. I do have the presentation. Let me know if you can see my screen, I hope.
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. I did share window, but it's not.
I could try and share as well and walk through it, Sharon.
Yeah, let me see. How about now?
No.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. We got
Yeah,
it.
Oh, thank you, Craig. I'm sorry.
I think
don't
that's
know
my
why it's
screen.
not
So
working. Okay.
Yep.
Thank
So
you.
I'll man the mouse. You do the talking.
Okay, great. Well, we have to start with a picture of the beach because, it's getting to be fall and we're going to miss the beach. To preface the discussion, we went through the program design elements and we want to balance, making changes that are important without moving the needle too quickly so that we can see how those changes will impact participation. And we don't want to make any quick changes because we don't want to change participation quickly either. We want to try to get to a point where we know the impact of each of the inputs. So the 3 things that we are proposing are, the first is the elimination of the freeze program. The freeze program is not being used, and it's also not advantageous compared to deferral or credit. And when we get to more details on that, I'll ask Mr. Murray to provide more details. The second proposal is to lower the qualifying age of the deferral program from 75 to 65 so that it matches the credit program. And then also it aligns closely with towns where we looked at their program specifications. So 65 is in line with practices of other towns that we looked at. And then in terms of qualifying assets, we had discussed making a change to that. The 650,000 that's currently in place it's been at 650,000 since at least 2012, and perhaps prior to that. We don't know how long it's been since that number's been changed, but we know it's been at least 2012. Our initial proposal was to raise that from 650 to 675, but we've also discussed moving it from 650 to 750. And when you take a look at what percentage that would be a year, it's like less than 1% a year. We have details that we can provide on that as well. So that's the overview. Just for our reference and for the public's edification, I had included a couple of the detail slides on the current state of the Senior Disabled Tax Relief Program. And this was originally presented to us in June. And so I just included this for our reference. I know that the print is really small, but we're seeing like slight decrease in participation in the program. And so you'll see like on this page and then on the next page, it shows, it's so tiny, I apologize. It's so tiny, it's really hard to read. But I really put this in there, you know, for the public's edification so that we can, you know, we can see like we've had a slight decrease in participation. And so, you know, this is why we want to move the needle a little bit on the program specifications.
So Sharon, let me interject for 1 second. I want to go back to this slide
Sure.
here, which kind of shows the program. Historically, 2020 is on the far right, 2025 fiscal year is far left. The numbers to focus on are in terms of dollars and applications. In 2020, the program was about $3.3 million and 1,300 applicants. That stayed, the number of applicants stayed steady for a couple of years. 1311 dropped to 1306, dropped to 1318, but the dollar amounts went up from 3333 to 41. And I'm just saying this because, again, I'm not sure how much can be seen on the screen. In 2023, we started to see a drop off in the number of applicants, dropping from 1,300 to about 1,100. Dollar amounts went from 4.1 down to 3.6, and then it's continued to decline. 3.6 dropped to 3.4, 3.4 dropped to 3.2, and the number of applicants dropped. Qualified applicants dropped from 1,100 to 1,092 to 1,019. So we are, the trend is consistent with what Sharon described, and I'm not necessarily sure that we want to make major changes at this point because I think the program is one of the better programs in the state. But there's certainly a trend that warrants some consideration here. So just wanted to kind of stress that point.
Yes,
Sharon.
thank you.
I'm going to skip to the proposal number 1.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Craig.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pistilli, Representative Pistilli, would you mind, just for maybe the benefit of the public who may not be familiar with this, I know that this is in the supplemental backup.
Yes.
Before you get into what's changing, do you mind just a couple of sentences on, you know, what is the freeze program and what does it work? And same thing, what is the deferral program? What is the credit program? So that everyone knows what it is before we talk about what changes. I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, sure. And why don't we have Mr. Murray on, and Ross, you're on, right?
Yes, there he is.
All right, great. So just for the purposes of explaining, I'm going to defer to Mr. Murray since he's interfacing with the public most often. So would you mind just walking us through, for the benefit of the public, the 3 programs, and then also we can segue into, why we think the elimination of the freeze program makes sense.
Of course. I'm just going to back up and just provide a little more information on the drop in applicants. Those years where you saw that staying about 1,300, that was during COVID, and there was an executive order by the governor that applicants.
Lori, I'm sorry, I can't hear Ross.
Yeah,
Also,
Ross, you're a little, I can barely hear you, but I think I'm struggling. I think everyone is.
Yeah. No luck, Ross.
I forgot how much I hated these Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I know, right?
There's always a technical snafu.
Go ahead, Ross, speak. Now we
No
can't hear
luck.
you at all.
Yeah, nothing.
Down to 0.
I mean, I don't know, if Craig or Sharon, if you want to give an overview of either,
Yeah, I've got on the screen here the 3
Yeah.
programs that we have are the credit program, which is our biggest program, and the lion's share of what the program is for all intents and purposes. The freeze program is the option number 2 on the screen, where it allows a person to freeze their taxes, but it only is in place for 6 years. So after 6 years, they have to come back into the property tax program. Most people, when they do the math between a freeze program and the credit program, it's more beneficial to go the credit program route. So the freeze program just isn't being utilized. Option 3 is the deferral program, which is similar to the freeze, but doesn't have the 6-year time limit. But it does have to be paid back. It's truly not getting any relief, tax relief. It's a tax deferral. So there's a payback component to that, where I think most people don't necessarily want to kick the can. And I think when we looked at the current participation right now, this year and the last couple of years, there have only been 2 households that have taken advantage of the deferral program. So for all intents and purposes, the program that is being utilized by our residents is the credit program.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank
Yes.
you. Welcome,
Okay.
Ross.
So I'm just going to back up. The participation stayed pretty steady in 2021, 22, because that was the COVID years, and there was an executive order by the governor that the applicants did not need to reapply. So they were all just rolled over, and many that should have dropped off did not drop off because they didn't come in. Also I think it was for 22, that's when the program had a bump in the benefit level for the credit program. So the percentage cap of the taxes went up and the credit amount went up. So I think that's why you saw a bump in the actual cost for that year. As Craig was saying, we see just about everyone takes the credit program. We've, since I've been here in 2017, we've never had an applicant on the freeze. And back then, I think we had 5 or 6 on the deferral, and we're down to 2. And those 2 have been on the program for many years. So we have not even had a new applicant on the deferral in quite a while. And one last thing on the deferral, there is an interest charge on the amount that is deferred, and it's typically around 3%. So it's favorable interest rate, but still there is a cost, and does need to be paid back.
Can I ask a question? So and I'm just going from memory and looking at this. So only the attractive thing about the deferral program is that the income level is a little bit higher. So if you don't qualify for the credit program, you could qualify for the deferral. Is that right?
Yes, and you could actually, if you're looking at just cash flow, the deferral, in a lot of cases could be a better option. If you're just looking to keep money in your pocket to spend, but down the road, that it would need to get paid back.
Yeah, okay. So it's higher income level, potentially more lucrative in terms of the benefit you get, but it's not a permanent, benefit like the credit is. It's sort of like think of it as a reverse mortgage.
It's similar, right? And from my experience, most people don't want to have to repay something, even if it's more beneficial initially.
And then there's never been an applicant to the freeze program, correct? We
No,
haven't had an applicant
I've
to
never
that.
seen one.
Yeah. So I'll take it back to the presentation. So proposal number one is to just eliminate the freeze program. It shouldn't move the needle at all in terms of what our program currently, the credits that are currently coming through our financials. But it would be an administrative benefit for the tax assessor's office and to be able to eliminate this and not worry about it. It would help eliminate some confusion for the applicants as well. So this one, I think, should be a fairly easy one.
And it's also the least advantageous. So it's almost like if we remove it, then we're removing the least advantageous approach.
Yeah. So Sharon, do you want to take us through proposal number two?
Yeah, so the second proposal would be to change the age to qualify for the deferral program from 75 to 65. And we took a look at towns with their design provisions. And this was an analysis that was conducted by subcommittee members prior to this particular committee. And what we did was we went through and refreshed all of the information that was previously gathered by previous members of the RTM. And we didn't see much movement in terms of how any changes to programs in these different towns. But one thing that we did note is that most towns have a combination, like the most prevalent combination for deferral is age 65. If they offer a deferral program, 65 is the most common age. And then also if we lower the age to 65, it would be consistent with the credit program so that it would be uniform. And then Mr. Murray, you can confirm for me, like we're not really expecting a huge uptick in people to apply for the deferral program as a result of this age change. There may be additional people who apply, but we're not expecting it to be, like a huge jump.
No, I wouldn't expect a large number of people. Yeah, again, we haven't had an applicant since I've been here, a new one, maybe one.
Yeah, and just intuitively, as a putting my financial hat on, I would expect that if part of what makes the deferral program less attractive than the credit program is that the applicant does have to pay this back over time. So if we're lowering the eligibility age from 75 to 65, they're just starting that clock on the deferral earlier, which means they'll pay back more in the long run. I don't think it's necessarily a change that will result in more people applying for this program. I think the only benefit really is just, again, to make this age requirement consistent with other towns and consistent with the age qualification for the credit program, which would help the tax assessor's office administer the program and help potentially avoid some confusion for the residents.
And you're saying on that page where you were showing just the history of the applications, basically in 2023, 2 people applied for the deferral in total. Is that right?
Yeah, so the deferral program is this third line, and
So-
there were, let's see, how many, if I scroll over, 5 people in 2020, 5 people in 21, dropped to 3, dropped to 2, dropped to 2, dropped to 2. I'm guessing, Mr. Murray, that those are the same people, and we're not seeing new people come in.
No, those 2 have been on the program for a long time.
All right.
Sharon, do you want to before we move on to proposal number 3, are there any questions about 1 or 2 that we haven't already addressed?
Let me just see here. I don't see any questions. Okay.
So Sharon, do you want to take us through proposal number 3?
Yes, so I wanted, I guess for the public's sake, we want to give a little bit of background, right? So the 650,000, which is the qualifying asset value, that does not include your primary residence. So it's anything excluding your primary residence, including like brokerage accounts, or how else would, like Ross, we've talked about this at length. How else would you characterize it?
I believe I have I don't know if this got included, but I have the affidavit that we have people sign.
Oh, that's right. We meant to include that with this PowerPoint and we didn't.
I believe it was in the supplemental backup.
Yeah, we sent it with a
Okay, you can just
supplemental
talk
backup.
through it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so because this hasn't changed since at least 2012, we looked at different ways that we might model carrying this number forward, right? Like what should be the appreciation rate for this? And it's kind of hard. Like, what do you do? Like for brokerage accounts, would you use, the average return on the S&P 1500? Like, we brainstormed many different ways, but we can't actually, tie the asset value to a specific appreciation rate. So we went through and modeled, what would 1% a year look like? Because we know that the world is moving faster than 1% a year. Let's just see what that would look like. And the other rate that we looked at was 2.5%, which was the average cost of living adjustment for Social Security. And then we also looked historically, the last increase that had been proposed was 5% every 5 years. And that proposal was made by the Senior Disabled Tax Relief Subcommittee of the RTM in 2017. We don't have the background of where that came from, but we said, okay, well, let's just model that out also. And so if you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see that even if we model out at 1% to move us forward to 2024, we're just about hitting 750,000. And so one of the discussions that we had in our joint subcommittee meeting of the Board of Finance and the RTM, Senior Disabled Tax Relief Committee, was, our first thought was, well, let's just make a small movement forward to see if it has any impact at all. We could make a tiny movement from 650 to 675, but when we're talking about the fact that this number has not changed since 2012, even moving it to 750 is not a huge jump. When you consider, that's 1% a year.
Yeah, and so let me chime in there, Sharon. Thank you. That's good background. One of the things that struck me as we talked about this in committee is that I don't expect that anyone on the Board of Finance or the RTM expected this qualifying asset value, total asset value, to be a static number indefinitely. And I don't necessarily, we can talk as a board whether we think it should be tied to some cost of living adjustment. When we were in our committee meeting, Mr. Murray mentioned that he does have state published inflation rates that he applies to income values. That's already part of the program, so we could piggyback off of that if we wanted to. Or we could say, no, we want to reserve the right to revisit this periodically, but it's been 13 years, so or more. So let's make a individual adjustment to this number, kind of reset it, and then going forward, we can talk about whether there's a periodic adjustment, an annual inflation adjustment. But I think at a minimum, it's appropriate to consider just to maintain the status quo. 650,000 today is not 650,000 from 2012. So if we wanted to maintain the status quo, we would adjust for the time that's passed and bring it up to something in the neighborhood of 750,000, in my opinion. But I'm just one of 9 votes on this board. It's ultimately not the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee's call. I really wanted to have a discussion in this group as to what we think is appropriate, and then we can move forward. I did check with our town attorney in terms of making sure we follow proper process, and I'm very appreciative that the RTM got the ball started on this discussion along with Mr. Murray. But ultimately, the process is the Board of Finance will make a recommendation to the RTM, and the RTM will choose to adopt it or not. And they don't have the ability to make changes to what the Board of Finance recommends. Now, we can piggyback off of what the RTM has provided us for discussion tonight, but ultimately, what we decide, whether it's tonight or at another meeting, will be a recommendation that we make to the RTM, which they can choose to adopt or not. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Do you have any other comments? I'd like to take the presentation down so we can all see each other, unless you have more comments you want to make before we go to Q&A.
No, I can always pull this back up if we need to, but I'll stop.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Appreciate that presentation, and thank you for all the work that you did. So questions from the board? I see Mr. Mottola.
Yeah, I was on the subcommittee, and I'm really more comfortable just going to the 675, seeing where we are in a year or so. I'm not sure I'm very comfortable voting on a built-in increase every year or 2 years or 5 years until we see how 675 goes. And I think that's the recommendation of the RTM subcommittee right now anyway. So that's my thoughts. I could be totally wrong about it, but I want to be conservative with respect to this. I just want to see how it affects the budget. The rest of the changes I'm fine with. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Other comments and questions from board members? Mr. Testani.
Yeah, I just was going to say, Madam Chair, that I think John's comments make sense. To me, that sounds pretty modest, pretty reasonable. And I think moving forward with the budget looming, it's certainly probably best to stay as conservative as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Testani. Mr. Walsh, you had comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. A couple questions. Mr. Murray, do you know the reasoning why the number of applicants has gone down?
Not for certain.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the uncertainty? Like, give me your uncertain ideas.
I think it's people are the seniors are selling their homes. They're taking advantage of the market and cashing in on that house and moving.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, because equity's gone up 30% in the last 3 years, and they're trying to take their money and get out while they can.
I can tell you just from the report I prepared this past year, we had 36 people that failed to refile, which could be people that moved. and 39 were sold. Houses were sold. And other than that, people that have passed away was 56. So, dying and selling and not reapplying are the two top reasons that we lose participants.
Am I correct in doing the addition? That's 80 something of the applicants have gone because they've either moved or died?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. And there aren't a lot of new seniors moving into the community, correct? For a couple of reasons. We're an expensive community, one. Two, if they need a mortgage rates are sky high right now, correct?
Yeah, but I couldn't tell you if that's why they're not moving in or if there's other reasons. That I just don't have any data on.
Okay. One of the reasons to have the program to begin with, because I've been on this committee a number of times, is to try to keep seniors in town. I guess when equity goes up, your equity goes up by 30% in a very short amount of time. Nothing's really going to keep you here if you really want to, have your largest nest egg going into your retirement, correct?
True.
So it's not really having somewhat of its intended effect. So I will say, based on all that, I mean, I don't see a great reason to make change to the program. I do have no problems with proposals 1 and 2. I am lockstep with Mr. Matola's idea of going to the 675 as opposed to going to 750. I don't believe that we should just sit here and because the number of applicants has gone down, we start expanding the best senior disabled tax relief in the state of Connecticut and making it better just because we see the numbers going down. Because of the reasons we just mentioned. People are just either dying or choosing to leave us because they want to cash in their nest egg. So I for those reasons, I think I'm lockstep with Mr. Matola and Jack, who supported that already as well, is to approve proposals 1 and 2 and then to change proposal 3 to 675.
That's a motion, Madam
you.
Chair. I'll second it.
Not yet. I think we're still open for discussion. Thank you. I think the proposal is 675. I think Mr. Curley was just sort of throwing out that if we wanted to discuss something else, we could. Mr.
Yeah.
Penley, did you have a question?
Yeah, just more of a comment. I think this is a bit new to me, so I'm inclined kind of to defer to some of the folks here who have had more experience with it. But just looking at it, if at some point we created this tax benefit and we pegged $650,000 as an amount of money that's sort of a level of means where people should perhaps be entitled to some kind of tax relief, that number is way behind us now. So bringing it up does make sense. So I think we do need to bring it up. I'm not going to go beyond there and say how high it needs to go. But the number proposed is pretty modest. So I would be in favor of at least doing that, and probably just sort of philosophically inclined to doing more. It doesn't look like, and I think most people are going to be getting, on the lower end of the credit anyhow. So I don't think you're going to have this tremendous impact on the budget. But I don't know. Certainly moving up to 675 doesn't seem dramatic to me, and the spirit of the tax relief is kind of in jeopardy with where the qualified asset level is right now. So that's my only comment on there. Perhaps not much of direction either way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Penley. Other questions? Mr. Curley, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to make sure we're clear on the process. We were the 675 recommendation from the RTM Senior and Disabled Tax Relief is really a starting point for a discussion, because their recommendation doesn't ultimately, I don't want to say carry weight, but it according to the process outlined by our town attorney, it's whatever recommendation the Board of Finance makes to the RTM, that's the one that's going to matter, right? And I know, and I don't want to speak for Sharon or Dave from the RTM committee, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when the RTM committee put that forward, they were trying to be conservative, but there is an appetite for a higher level. So my point is, if we recommended a higher number, it wouldn't be opposed. And I just want to point out that over the course of time from 2012 to 2025, 13 years, or I guess 14, going from 650 to 675 is a 0.29% annual increase rate. That's way behind inflation of any measure. And going from 650 to 750 is only a 1.11% annual inflation factor. So I'd like to keep the program in a status quo state, but as Mr. Penley pointed out, 650 as a value from 2012 is long since gone. That number is, if we don't take any action, we're really letting down our seniors. So I'm an advocate for taking it up to 750.
Okay. I have a comment, but anyone else before? Okay. Couple points. I largely agree with Mr. Walsh's comments. I think our objective here is to measure participation in the plan. We did have a rather significant change to this plan a few years ago, and the reason that we didn't want to make any further changes quickly is we wanted to understand what happened. And again, I agree with Jim and Mr. Murray. I don't think that it's the plan provisions that are causing the decline. I think people are cashing out. I mean, if we had evidence that there was a drop off, because the qualifying asset test was too low, that would be one thing. If we somehow knew that there were a bunch of seniors that were $10,000 over or something and losing out, I don't think we know that. I think we have to keep in mind the objective here, which the objective is to have a plan that supports keeping seniors in town. And if the reason for the decline is not the plan provisions, I just think that's a fair thing to note. The second point I would make is I'm fine with the 675. I don't know how we could responsibly raise this to a more significant amount without any kind of modeling out or estimate of what that would be. And maybe that's somewhere and I missed it, but I think you'd want to know if you went from 650 to 750, how much does that increase the cost of the plan? What's the estimate of households that might impact? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that taking a modest step in the absence of any financial estimate of what this is going to cost is probably appropriate. So I am also in favor of, doing this slowly and seeing what happens. And then we can go from there. I'm not in favor of committing to any, fixed percentage every couple of years because a lot of different things can happen. And I think we just want to keep the flexibility to be able to do that and react to circumstances as they are appropriate. So I'm of the mind that the original, I'm fine with the first two. The first one seems like a no-brainer. The second one I don't think is going to matter. I think if 75-year-olds are opting into the deferral plan, 65-year-olds certainly will not. And then for this one, I think a modest change in the absence of any, modeling of what the impact is fine.
So,
yeah, Mr. Curley?
Yeah, I just want to pose that question to Mr. Murray because we did talk about that in committee. Mr. Murray, I think it's based on our prior conversations, I'm guessing it's difficult to do the analysis that our chair has asked for in terms of trying to model out what the cost of making this change, whether it's going from 650 to 675 or 650 to 750, to model that out in a way to know what the potential impact on the town would be. We don't know, we don't have an avenue for knowing whether people left because they no longer qualified for tax credit and then moved and they're, it's a bit of chicken and the egg, but I'd like you to weigh in on that point.
Well, are you talking about weighing in on the deferral and raising it and what impact that would have?
Um,
And modeling, yeah, I
No,
mean, I
not
would agree,
deferring. I think on the we're talking about the qualified asset test. I
right?
mean, I think there's certainly ways that you can get an idea. I think you could do a survey. I think you could work with the senior advocates. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but my point was that I understand it's hard to model. And therefore, if we don't know the answer, we have no idea what different levels of higher qualifying asset tests would ultimately cost. To me, it makes sense to increase it modestly, and then that can be measured as you go along, and you can determine, if that's reasonable. That's just my sense. Mr.
and
Walsh?
Sharon,
I would just like to concur with you, Madam Chairwoman. I think the only way to really properly model it is actually to raise it slowly and see what happens. I mean, we could sit here and do surveys or whatever, they might not be accurate. The accuracy is gonna be, okay, change it. If we choose 675, what was the impact? That's gonna be the real model. And if the next time this comes around, we wanna move it up another 25 grand to 700, and then we'd get there, but at least we'd be protecting the taxpayers that we didn't like just jump into this blindly. And we got hit with a lot more people than we thought we were gonna get hit with.
and we've been reluctant to make changes on a more frequent basis, trying to do it, several years apart. Would this board be open to considering 700 next year or 725 the year after? I mean, do you want this committee to come back each year and continue to poke this number up little by little?
Mr. Mottola, did you have
Listen, you heard what I said. I don't have a problem in a year from now looking at it again. It's not that heavy of a lift to look at it. Our committee can look at it again and see where we are. I think it's prudent to be conservative for the reasons stated by myself, Mr. Walsh, Ms. Charlton, and Mr. Testani, and several other members, I believe too. So I have no issue looking at this again next year. I think the issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, 2 years ago, we were looking at the plan again, but it had a substantial change. So we didn't allow it to, grow. And so this is a little different, I think. It's a very modest change, and we can certainly look at this again next year. That's how I feel. And I have a feeling that maybe 675 maybe isn't enough, but I don't want to go there yet. Maybe I'm being way too conservative, but I've expressed my concerns of jumping too high too soon. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, and maybe Jim or Mary or someone with a longer tenure, I thought that the history of this board was to reconvene this committee every 2 years. I mean, I don't think a year from now, we're gonna know what this did yet. We won't even be able to measure the numbers, because by the time they go into effect, we won't. So I'm not sure this is an annual thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think it does. I think we're all saying the same thing. Do it modestly, let enough time pass to measure it, and then revisit and readjust as appropriate. Now, those are our ideas. I mean, Craig, respectfully, we don't know who's going to be on this body in 2 years and 4 years and 6 years. So, we can all share our thoughts, but we can only agree on what we're going to agree on now, I think. Mr. Walsh, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I don't know. A year from now seems a little too soon. I mean, maybe 2 years to take a look at it. It might be better, and at least we'd have more data to look at.
And I have no issues with all of what was being discussed, but I just want to reiterate the point. Like, if we take this up from 650 to 675 and revisit it in 2 years, that's less than a 2% increase for that short little period. So even that's below the inflation rate. So if we're not revisiting it every 2 years, then you're kind of making an argument that says that we should do make it an incremental jump of more than 25,000 here. Because if we're
I
not,
don't think we were saying we shouldn't revisit it in 2 years. What I said was, I don't think we should revisit it next year, because I don't think next year we're even gonna have the data to be able to measure if this did anything. 2
right, but
years from now, we will. So if we
Well-
see that it continues to go down, or if it was flat or whatever, and we have an indication that that's because the asset value continued to be too low, maybe at that point, someone wants to make it 700 or 750 or whatever. I just think 1 year doesn't give enough time for the data to bake in. That's all.
and I understand that point, Madam Chair, but my counterpoint to that is, if you're making a $25,000 incremental change and it's an every 2 year thing, even that small change, even if 650 was the right number for this year, let alone going back to 2012, a $25,000 incremental change is less than 2% over 2 years.
Understood. Okay.
It still lags behind.
All right. So I think we understand where we are. I think Mr. Curley is of the mind to go higher. I think other people have spoken. Is there anybody else that wants to weigh in on this? Because I think we have to figure out what we're voting on. And we can either vote on the provisions separately or together, but it'd be helpful in taking that vote if we know where everybody is. I mean, Ms. LeClaire, do you have any comments? Mr. Stark?
I agree with most of what's been said, so I haven't added anything. I did have a question before on what assets are included in the computation. Do we include like 401ks and IRAs and Roth IRAs in that computation, or are they outside of it?
We would include savings that have not been taxed. Well, I'm sorry, that's not even true. No, IRAs, yes. 401ks. Oh, there you go. There's the affidavit with our list. So you can see the items we point to.
So if you include those balances in that number, that number's a pretty low number, I would say.
Say that again, please.
Oh, I agree that if those balances in your retirement accounts are included in that 650 or 675 number, that's a low number, because that's what you have for retirement to live off of.
Right.
It's not like the old days where you had a monthly pension that would increase every year. That's it. Like, that's all you have. So, but, I think if we increase it a little bit and then look at it for 2 years, we can always go back and adjust it.
And just to be clear on that affidavit, the applicants do not complete that top section. So we don't see their actual asset number that they're swearing to. We just don't know where people are at. We don't know if they're, 250s, 600s, 651. We don't have that data.
Okay. It's the honor system.
Yeah, they sign the affidavit whether they're above or below that number.
So the worksheet is for their benefit as they fill out the form. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. LeClaire. Any other comments on this?
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Rock has a comment.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was playing with my mute. Look, I'm in Craig Curley's camp. I think that, when you put forth a program and it's been 13 years since a raise in the number, that you've got to do something more than $25,000. I mean, in 2017, we're looking at a bigger number that was proposed but then not agreed to, and it sort of got washed away. And now we're that number. Now we're looking at a number that's $7,500 less than that. This is, I think I think 750 is a great number. I think that's, I'm with Craig on it, and I'm not a voting member, obviously, but I'm the vice chair of this group in the RTM. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. I think it's probably worth saying, I don't think this is a lesser recommendation. 2017, I can't remember what year we made the last revisions to this plan, but they were substantial, and the goal of the plan, and I say this very loosely, of this last set of substantial changes that were made, was to try and structure this plan so that the seniors who needed the dollars most were getting a very substantial benefit. Rather than having a broad pool of seniors, we were sprinkling a few bucks to a lot of people. So the plan was modified so that it really focused on lower income seniors, and the point of that was to give them a meaningful credit that would make a difference in their ability to live in this town. So I think, we weren't just looking at one number back when we did it, and Mr. Walsh probably remembers this more, but it was the last iteration of this was quite a substantial change, and it was really trying to refocus the program in that direction. I mean, we can all agree with that or not, but kind of that's what was done. And it did make the program sort of richer overall by doing so in terms of over budget dollars. So, I don't think anybody's here is proposing any kind of major restructuring. I'm, again, fully in agreement with raising the limits. Okay, Ms. Ruggiero has a question, and then I think we can decide how we want to vote, but my sense is that maybe we can vote on the first two items and then vote on the third item. Ms. Ruggiero?
Amy, we can't hear you.
I think you're muted, yeah.
Are you double muted, maybe?
Yeah, we can't, you're not showing as mute, but we can't hear you.
So, Madam Chair, I do have the ability to read the room. So the three proposals that were in the presentation were to eliminate the freeze program and to change the age of the deferral program from 75 to 65. And the third proposal on paper as presented was to increase the qualified total asset value from 650 to 675. So reading the room, if it's more efficient, I'd propose that we vote to approve all three of those proposals as presented in the presentation.
Okay, so is that your motion?
Yeah.
Okay, can I have a second on that? Ms. Ruggiero. Okay, all in favor of the proposal to make those three changes as stated and in the presentation?
Aye.
Okay, I believe, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that is unanimous. All right.
So,
once again, I want to thank the members of the RTM committee and the Board of Finance subcommittee. I'm glad we were able to get this done. So again, thank you for all of your work. And let's look forward to seeing how this goes and what the result is.
And
Ms.
thank you for the
Charlton,
healthy discussion.
yeah, thank you. I wanted to thank you all, and then also I wanted to give a shout out also to Representative Shea and Representative Lubwazak, who are on this evening, and then also Representative McDermott for their work. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all. Appreciate all your work on this. All right. So that is it for our voting items. So let's see here. We are going to, that's it. So we're going to move on to item 5 to hear and consider any communications. I did have a quick update that I wanted to make. I think Mr. Testani had some comments he wanted to make, but before that, I see Mr. Becker and Mr. Gerber on, or I did before. Is there anything from the administration? Any communications from you all?
I just had nothing direct on our end. I don't know if you wanted to bring up, or if you wanted me to bring up.
Yeah, I was just wanted to provide a
Yeah,
summary and update on the capital plan, because just for the
That'd be
benefit of the public and the board, just to tell everybody where we are. So I'll do that quick, and then, David, if you have anything to add, you're welcome to.
Okay.
So, again, for the board, but also for the benefit of the public, because it seems like there's some confusion out there after our 2 capital planning meetings next week. So first, I want to sincerely thank everyone again for making themselves available for both of those meetings. I know that wasn't convenient. I know some people had conflicts and couldn't make it to both, but in retrospect, I'm very happy we split it over 2 nights, because we certainly needed the time. And we left those 2 meetings with what I believe was a consensus that a lot of important progress had been made, but that the plan needs some additional work. At a minimum, deferring or adjusting projects in order to build some cushion at the plan level. We were very close on projected debt service to our policy without any cushion at the plan level in certain years. The other big assumption is we agreed we need a policy, or at least some guiding principles, on how the WPCA projects will be financed. And it's important that the right constituencies are included in that process, because that's a big decision. We have two discrete groups of taxpayers that are impacted by that decision. And any changes in those WPCA assumptions from what's there now could significantly impact the overall capital plan. So for the board, I believe we're going to be asked to vote on some capital projects before all of that work gets sorted out. There are some, I'll say smaller projects that have been on the plan for a while. Those may come before us in the near term, but, I believe we all agreed that before we commit to projects that are larger in the tens of millions of dollars, we do want to see the updated plan and understand its feasibility. So just in terms of next steps, October 17th, the Fund Balance Committee is planning to meet to work on the WPCA financing piece. That will be a public meeting. It will be noticed soon. Any board members that want to attend are welcome. And if you do decide to attend, you will be welcomed to participate fully like a committee member. The capital plan itself, and kind of looking at how that needs to be shifted around or reworked to make the numbers more palatable, that is in the administration's hands. They're going to need to lead the process of reworking that together with the superintendent or Board of Ed, however that process has to work. The last item, I did email board members, the Dwight project, which is the largest project on the plan and a different order of magnitude than any of the others. I know prompted some questions from board members the other night, and on that one, what I've committed to do is provide our questions in writing, the questions that we raised at the last meeting, plus any others that you send to me. I commit those in writing and provide those to the superintendent and the Board of Ed chair so that they can be well prepared for the next discussion on that item, Dwight. So most of you have forwarded your questions to me for inclusion. Not everyone has, so if you can please do that, if you have time to provide that input, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm not sure when that item will come back before us, but ideally I'd like to get the board's questions to the superintendent and give them time to assemble any data that we want, and we'll see when they're ready to come back to us. Mr. Mottola.
Yeah, I missed the meeting and I'm watching it. I'm about 2 hours in. So, but the questions that other board members have submitted to you, can you share those with all of us?
Oh, of course.
We don't do I don't want to repeat it.
Yeah, no. I will share those. I have some generic ones from the meeting. I have some specific ones. I'll put them all together. I'm going to, for practical purposes, I'm probably going to try to send those over by tomorrow night, just because I'm going to be out of the country for 10 days. But that's not to say we can't add more questions later, but anything we can do to gather up our questions in advance, I think that would be helpful to them. I know that they are, that they believe that project is very high priority for a number of reasons. And so we need to do our due diligence, but however we can do this to work together is helpful.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that? I don't know, Mr. Becker, you're working on your piece, I assume?
So yeah, if I may, last week was very productive, both nights. And I, in particular, and I think I expressed my frustration with our efforts and some walls that we hit with the Board of Ed, and I appreciate the board's diligence that on Thursday evening with the Board of Ed, and hopefully that, along with these questions, moves this in a better direction. They seem to be marching towards a seed money vote as soon as next Tuesday, and I'm hopeful that they don't, and don't expect that clearly to go anywhere. We did remind them that moving other items forward, was expressed as an option. On our end, on the town, administration side, we are. It's a little bit difficult to do in a bit of a vacuum, but we're doing our best to at least start to try to do some analysis on what these options and even some alternatives may look like, based upon industry standards on square footage and things like that, to at least start to put another set of eyes on it. It's difficult not to do that though or to do that without the collaboration piece. So that anything the Board of Finance can continue to do to stress that to them would be very helpful as we try to work through these issues. So again, we do appreciate the support that the board has so far shown in that direction.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think there's an interest on all sides to make sure we're collaborating so that we're not going in different directions. Okay, any questions on that? Mr. Walsh?
When is it going to be decided, like, by the administration, what amount of, how close to that 10% we want to come to? I mean, we talked about it in the abstract that, well, we don't want to be at the 9.9%. The model shows that we're going to get there. And I think it's 31. We're going to be riding right up against it without really any wiggle room for any type of disaster that could come up. And at some point, when are either our board going to talk about it, the administration going to make a decision about it policy wise, because that's going to drive certain of those years. And we need to get to that number sooner than later, because the 1 year where the Board of Ed wants $54 million really just can't happen. And we got to get past the fantasy that it can. So decisions are going to need to be made in that area. And I'm not, David, I see your face in front of me right now, so I'm not directing it really to you, but
no, that's okay.
but we're really going to have to start adjusting things a little bit to get more realistic, I think, on what projects we can actually do. And what concerned me a little bit, and I saw a little frustration with you a little bit, because that project, the Dwight project moving up obviously changes a lot of things, as you mentioned, like driving interest numbers and debt service numbers up more drastically, affecting budgets more immediately. So I thought it was a great discussion last week. I really did. I thought the Board of Ed discussion was probably the most valuable one I've seen in a long time, probably because of everything we had heard the previous meeting with the WPCA and some of the town projects. But it seems to me some decisions earlier than later on, like, where do we want to get with the level of debt service? Do we want to get to without leaving wiggle room for emergencies to come up? Has to be set to be able to correct and more finalize the capital plan.
Yeah, can I answer that?
Sure.
And Mr. Becker can chime in.
Yeah.
I think the administration is going to have to make a proposal like that, but I would like the board to give its feedback. I think what I heard from board members, we talked a lot about, building in contingencies and having some cushion at the plan level. Just because it's not so much that emergency projects come up, but that identified projects are coming in at double their costs. And that's what's causing the need for this contingency. We're all aware of that. So, you know, I thought that at this October 17th meeting, you know, we could start to have that discussion because there's a lot of things that are going to affect it. We can establish a percentage, but the WPCA funding mechanism, for example, could affect that greatly. And right now, those projects are scheduled out in a certain way in terms of how they're financed. That could have a very big impact on this whole equation. So, you know, I think for practical purposes, you know, somebody's going to have to be there with their computer and the model, and we're going to have a discussion about it. And perhaps one of the things that we can look at is, you know, historically, how many, you know, what level of surprises have we been getting? So therefore, what level of cushion is appropriate? But short story, I thought we could start to provide some input at that meeting, and then ultimately the administration is going to have to make a recommendation on this, whether it's 9% or 8.5% or whatever it is.
And if I could to that,
Yes.
I agree, and I think that committee will be a helpful piece for that to you know turn it to get in that direction. We were striving to go under 9, and we were striving, as I think as I had mentioned, and I think we pointed out in the town side portions, to put a lot of contingency factors and conservatism in the overall numbers. Where that gets tricky is when, like we talked about with some of the board projects, when they have, let's say, a 5% contingency, that could very rapidly, even far, you know, it has a lot of reach to drive that number in the wrong direction in the outlying years. So certainly, I think it's a sub 9 number, whether it goes, you know, deeper than that or not. But certainly those outlying years where there were 9s were alarming on our end. I mean, we're not in any way suggesting to be up there. There's got to be cushion, because even if something goes wrong in, say, year 3, it just compounds out into into years 7 and 8, where we were struggling with some of those percentages. So right off the bat, a sub 9 number, is an answer, but exactly where that lands, I'm not sure. WPCA, we put 25% contingencies on most of the larger items right off the bat. That obviously may need to go up. Some places, we had double or other factors. We had a minimum assumed a 5% escalation, and in instances where we need to use higher escalation, we did that. So, and I think between now and the 17th, even, we're going to try to drill down as on every day. We're working through those numbers and trying to be more accurate, and then make sure that they're accurate with some contingency factor and escalation no matter what. So I don't know if that is partially addresses it, but I mean that's what we're trying to do here. I mean, we're trying to avoid the pitfalls of the past.
That's great. Any questions? I mean, any input anyone has? I mean, again, my objective, particularly with these Dwight questions, is I don't want to have a meeting to discuss this item and be throwing out questions that people aren't prepared for with data, et cetera. So, I'm sure new questions will come up at the meeting, but, anything we can do to make that productive, I think would be great, in the spirit of trying to move forward with what I do believe sounds like a rather urgent project, in whatever fashion it moves forward. Okay. Mr. Testani, did you?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. So quite a few people on the board know, and first I want to apologize to my colleagues and Fairfield taxpayers for not being in attendance pretty recently. Many people know I've had some issues happening, and I'd rather not get into those. The people that need to know what those issues are know. But because of that, I decided to resign my position on the Board of Finance. I submitted a letter to Betsy Brown today, effective at the end of this meeting. I just felt as though my time starting with this issue wasn't going to allow me to continue in the way that I've tried to, in terms of my attendance and my participation, stay as it has been since I got elected. There is some irony that my political career will end as a elected member of a board of finance when it started 20 years ago this month as a elected member of a board of finance in a different town. So a little irony. I've had other elected positions in my career. Just it's somewhat significant that it's in the town that I grew up in. So I do want to, again, thank my colleagues for their indulgence, certainly the taxpayers, certainly all the department heads. I think most people on the board know I gravitated toward certain department chairs that I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for. Having said that, it's really everyone that are the town's chairs and department heads. I think the town in general is very fortunate to have the people it has, certainly on the emergency response part of the town. The chief, Calmaris, and I, and the deputy chief, people like Jessica Bromberg have made, in my opinion, an incredible difference to this town. Certainly Bucky Marsilio, Public Works. It's hard to go through, everyone, certainly on the finance department as well, and keeping what I hope will be somewhat of a conservative budget moving forward. I mean, honestly, I'm going to miss not saying something to Mr. Stark if he were to belabor on too long, as I feel like I'm doing right now in calling a point of order or trying to follow Robert's rules, which I know was the chair's favorite part of my participation, was my indulgence in Robert's Rules of Order. But I just, again, want to thank everyone for their patience with me, especially the last few weeks. A few extended very nice comments to me for what the situation is. And again, I appreciate that. Hopefully it's going to get better. And I just want to say thank you again. And it's been really a privilege and an honor to serve on the board. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. I'm happy to give anybody a chance to say anything, but
I don't want to get my plaque though, Lori.
yeah, I was just going to say, I'm sorry that we were not able to honor you in person on your last evening, but we definitely want to invite you back when we have your plaque. And I want to thank you for, you and I joined this board together 5 years ago. Yeah, our first few years were consumed with meetings just like this. So maybe that's some irony too, that they're ending with the dreaded Zoom meetings, but we got through COVID.
Yes, we did.
There were a lot of different challenges. Thank you for all your contributions on the board. Thank you for your service to the town. Anyone else want to make a comment here? We will see Jack again. Again, when the plaque's ready, we'll call you and we want you to show up. So
I'll definitely come back for the plaque for sure. I'm teasing, of course.
okay,
Great.
Mr. Walsh.
True?
Other,
Oh, Jim, did you want to say something?
Sure, yes. Jack, I'd just like to thank you for your service, not only to the board, but to the town. It's been a pleasure working with you, and it's been a pleasure becoming friends with you over the years. So I think you've done a great job, and you've done an honorable service. And I do understand some of the things that are going on, so I wish you Godspeed with some of that stuff as well. But I don't want to get into it. But anyway, Jack, thanks. Thanks for what you've done for the taxpayers. Thanks for your probing questions always. And we'll miss you here. Okay. So
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to start getting choked up, Larry, if this goes
All
on.
right, there's no crying.
No, I'm very emotional.
It is. All right. Okay, well, again, we'll have our chance to honor Mr. Testani at one of our next meetings. I'll get that plaque on order and maybe we can raise a toast together, all of us. But until then, for now, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Can I make that motion, Larry?
You can make it.
Thank
Second?
you. I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, second, Mr.
Thank you,
Curley.
everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Safe travels, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Yeah, safe travels for sure.